Hi everybody. Having to wrap up a bit warmer now. It's starting to get a bit chilly, isn't it? Anyway, okay, so today we are going to be doing a picture by, well, influenced by Georgia O'Keeffe. I hope you've printed this off. I've always liked Georgia's work. She's mainly known for floral paintings, but she does a lot of landscapes. She's one of the most prominent female painters from America. She had this very sort of specific palette of colours and did a lot of blending, so that's what we're going to look at. And I found this painting and I couldn't believe how similar it was, the landscape anyway, to the landscape round here in the Brecon Beacons. We're at the foothills of the Brecon Beacons in Llangadog, and even though I can't see this hill because this is in America, the one that we're going to be painting is this hill, which is Pen y Fan, and Corn Ddu, which is in the central Brecon Beacons, just near Brecon, between Brecon and Merthyr Tydfil. Stunning mountain, climbed it several times, and there is a lake down, just down here where I've swam. Very, very beautiful. But you can see the similarity in the two images, the shape of the hill. So I thought that we would paint this, but in the style of Georgia O'Keeffe. Okay, we did this a while back in class, and I can't remember what mountain we used, but I think we may have used Llyn y Fan, and this is Llyn y Fan, which is the mountain that's nearest to me, and I've swam in here as well. I can see this out of my studio window, just the peaks of Llyn y Fan, but again, very beautiful, less well visited than Pen y Fan, which has thousands of visitors every year. So yeah, that's what we'll do, is to paint Pen y Fan in the style of Georgia O'Keeffe. So it'll give those students who are members a second chance, if you did this already, if you're in my painting for pleasure classes in Carmarthen, but it'll give you a second chance to have another go. And if you're a new member, then it'll give you a chance to sort of work on colour mixing and blending acrylic particularly, because acrylic is quite difficult to blend. But I can't remember, let me just check my diary. Yeah, it's supposed to be in oils or water mixable oils, but what I'll do, I think, is I'll demonstrate the blending technique in acrylic, and then I will probably paint this in water mixable oils because I have them. If you haven't got them, they're an amazing medium, because if you like blending but don't like traditional oils because they smell, they're quite toxic, there's been an additive added to oil paint, basically, to convert them into water mixable oils, which means you don't have to use solvents and things like that, which I'll talk about later when I'm using them. Okay, this painting behind me here, which is of the view of out of my studio window of the Beacons, which is the sort of far western Brecon Beacons. This was done in water mixable oils, and they're very user friendly, but the only negative is that they take a little while to dry. Unlike acrylics that dry really quick, they can take a couple of days. Alright, so yeah, the next stage that you'll see is the drawing out process and how to set up. Okay, see you later. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a piece of acrylic paper and I've put a border around it using masking tape, and I've stuck it onto my board here. If you want to use an actual canvas, then go ahead. You can use a piece of board. I often use the back of a pad. So these backs here, I just cut them to size and then prime them with some acrylic paint or something like that, so I don't throw anything away. I'm going to undercoat this in acrylic, and then I'm going to probably put a bit of detail on in water mixable oils, because I want to show you how to use them. But because they're a little bit more expensive than acrylics, I'm going to use an underpainting in acrylic first, and it dries quickly, and then I'll use the water mixable oils. If you use water mixable oils throughout, you have to do your underpainting, and then you have to leave it to dry for a few days before you can paint on top of it. So for speed, I'm going to use acrylic. And I sent you this image, which is of Pen y Fan and Corn D in Brecon, and this image, which is of a mountain range in Mexico by Georgia O'Keeffe. And we're going to use this style to paint this painting. Okay, have a look at Georgia O'Keeffe's work. She does a lot of very interesting paintings. She's the highest selling female artist, and though she's not around anymore, she's still very popular. There's lots of images on the internet. So what I've got is some very cheap white acrylic and some ready mixed pale blue. So all I used was, you can use either ultramarine or cerulean or cobalt blue. It's up to you what colour blue you want to use, and this is that mixed with white paint. Okay, I just have some excess left from another painting that I did recently, so I'm going to use this. So it's just a pale blue you're after, and we're going to paint the sky here. I've just got a well, I've got a square brush here. I'm just going to use that because it's ready, and I've got clean water. I'm just going to pick up some of the blue paint. I'm just going to start to paint this onto the sky. And you can see it's quite transparent, the acrylic, which is often why you need to either put the paint on a lot more thickly. Oh, by the way, I drew this out before I started. I used the rules of thirds, which we've talked about in composition, just to put the very sort of almost the top of the mountains onto that third line there. And also they more or less correlate with the crosses. It's a good idea to put your subjects on or near the crosses. Okay, so try and use that method when you're painting. So down to the top of the hill, the mountain should I say. It's a beautiful mountain. If you've never been, go and have a look, or even go up it. It's the highest peak in the Brecon Beacons, and it's right in the middle. And where I live, which is over on the very western edge of the Brecon Beacons, there's another mountain called Pen y Fan, and that is very similar in structure, and again a beautiful mountain to walk up. It's a bit quieter as well. Pen y Fan tends to be very busy, mainly because it's very easy to access it from Cardiff and the valleys. So it's where they go to walk, the people who live down there, although I know some of them are in lockdown again at the moment, so they won't be walking anywhere. Good luck to them all. Okay, so there's the first coat. I'm going to let that dry, and then I want to put a second coat on. And actually I've got my hairdryer here, so I'm going to just dry it off really quick so that I can move on. There's a little bit of noise. Oh, it's not plugged in. 1 second. There we go. So the reason why I did that was because my cheap paint is not great. You have to put a second coat on. So this is just to make it less transparent. Get the paint on. Hopefully it's a bit better mixed than what I've got it in your palette. Don't worry if you lose your horizon. You can always draw it back in later. Get the paint on. If you want to use a bigger brush, it's raining heavily here today, so you can listen to the rain while I paint away here. Okay, so that's nicely covered now. You can see the difference between the stage before and now. Now, if you want to have this completely flat, the best thing to do is to take a brush, any brush, dry brush, oops, sorry, I just knocked that, a nice dry brush, and just lightly brush over, and you'll see that that just takes off those lines if you want it nice and even, and just make sure you wash your brushes afterwards. So the next stage is just to quickly put in some clouds. Oh, and maybe we can just look at how to make the horizon a bit lighter. So I'm just going to put a blob of white along near the base. Now this is working directly onto the painting. You might not want to do this. You might want to mix up a paler colour and add it when you're adding your blue. But I'm just going to pick this up now. I'm going to use this fan brush again. You don't have to use a fan brush. You can use any brush as long as it's clean and reasonably dry. This has just come out of the water pot, so I'm just drying it off with an old sock, and I'm just going to blend this in now. So I'm just going to go over the top and blend it, and you can see that that will lighten up the bottom of the sky a bit more than the top. Just lightly go over. Okay, there we go. Right, so clouds. So I'm going to take a let's see now, I've got a round brush here, and again I'm just going to put a couple of dots on directly onto the canvas, and that's just because I'm lazy and I don't want to use a palette to mix my colours. So I'm just going to put it straight onto, and I'm just going to sort of push it around like this until I've got a couple of clouds in there. Now if you want to make more realistic clouds, then please do so, but I'm going off of Georgia O'Keeffe, so she's got a couple of clouds there, so I'm going to put them in like hers and just push them around until they form a shape that you enjoy. And you can leave them thick like this if you want to. They're quite nice actually. Thick. They have a bit of texture. But hers are a bit blended. so I'm just going to take off a bit of the paint to show you how to do it if you want to blend it a bit more. So just go in with a cleaner brush and just move those lines around until you're happy. And you can see that some of the lines will go a bit transparent, but on her painting you'll see that some of the lines are transparent. So, you know, it depends how close you want the work to be to Georgia O'Keeffe's work, as to how much of this you do. I'm just wiping off a bit of the paint from this cloud here. Just keep moving it around until you're happy. Try to make the cloud slightly organic in form. There's a straight edge on that one. I quite like that one, but with this one I think I might leave it a little bit more organic. So a few more lumps at the bottom, that's all that means. Okay, so you can see that the lines are, you know, forming a sort of cloud shape anyway, so that's quite pleasing to the eye. So, you know, it's up to you. I'm going to leave it like that, I think. I quite like those. Oops. Okay, so that's your sky done. The next stage will be to do the distant hills. Okay, so now we're going to paint the ridges of the mountains, and there are a variety of blues and there's a little bit of pink in there, but we'll probably put the pink in afterwards. There's a little bit of green. So what I've got is the original sky blue colour, and then I use these pill boxes. I picked these up in charity shops, but they're old pill boxes, and I squeeze paint out because I've got big tubes of paint. And in here I've got an ultramarine, an indigo, turquoise and a cerulean blue or a cobalt blue. So if you've got those blues in your set, then please use them and mix them down, or whatever you need to do to get the colours on these mountains. If you haven't got these blues, then, you know, everybody should have in an acrylic set an ultramarine blue, and everybody should have a light blue, whether it be a cobalt blue or a cerulean blue. So these ones you may not have. If you want to mix a turquoise, you can use either of these colours and just add a bit of green into it. And then the indigo is just really a little bit of blue with either some Payne's grey or a little bit of black in it, and you'll get somewhere near that. We probably won't use that today. We're more likely to use these colours than these colours. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up some ultramarine. I've got a round brush, Dale Rowney number 6 round brush, and I'm just going to wet it slightly because these paints have dried out a little bit. So as I said with acrylic paint, the best thing to do is not to add too much water to them, because they tend to misbehave when you add too much water. So the less water the better. And we're just going to block in these hills. Okay, take up the blue and just begin to paint those very top edges of the peaks. Try and get your edges really crisp, and the only way to do that is by having enough paint on the very tips of your brushes. Follow the information on your photograph that describes these peaks try and get them as accurate as possible, because they are, to most people who know them, they are very recognizable. So if you get them wrong, they're likely to say that they're wrong, which is a shame. And really in the end it doesn't matter, but it's best if you can get them more or less the right shape. So the ridge comes up here, like I said, if your paint's a bit thick, just add in a touch of water, but not too much, because it will cause you issues, especially with lifting. So if you haven't got these little pill boxes like I've got, then obviously you can use a palette. Just squeeze out a little bit of paint and use your palette. Don't squeeze out too much because you can't put it back in. So, you know, be economical with your paint. And if you feel like you need to use a slightly smaller brush, then do that as well. I'm painting the very top of the ridges just so I get a nice even straight line. Okay, so it sweeps down, and then there's a little lump about there, and then it comes down again, and then into this curve there. So once you've got your ridge in, you can decide how much of that area you're going to paint in blue. So I'm going to paint down to here, like this, down to there, over there. So that'll be the next ridge coming down, like this. And then down here a little bit, and then I think, yeah, we'll do the rest of this mountain in blue. So because there's different shades on this mountain, I'm just going to spread out this paint that I've put on by just adding a touch of water, just to block it in, really. Just a touch of water, not too much. You don't want to, especially with the acrylic paper, you don't want to put too much on because it starts to bend and warp. It's not so much an issue with the canvas, but with the paper itself it tends to do that, so just be aware of that. I'm just re-wetting these edges. So now we've got a sort of a semi-wet surface to work with and to try and blend, and you know, it's not drying out on us, so we've got some time to work with it. And you can start adding in different tones. So there is a distant hill here, which is slightly lighter. So I'm just going to rub off a bit of the paint, like that. And I'm going to take a dot of the cerulean or cobalt blue, and I'm just going to paint over that distant hill there, just so that it separates from the foreground. You might not see it yet, but it will in the end. And then you can start adding different shades of blue according to how those mountains are behaving. And obviously you can see that there is a very strong flash of light coming over the tops of these mountains. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the pale blue colour that I had mixed for the sky, and I'm just going to pop that along those very top ridges. Actually, it stops there. Let's put that in. Maybe a bit of the cerulean. So the white, the paleness, the highlight on that hill stops. So I'm just gonna put that so it stops there, right? So I'm just gonna do that bit there. And can you see that I'm working my brush downwards, because that's the way the hill falls. It falls down to the left. So use your brush strokes to create that feeling of the fact that it's falling down to the left, like that. Okay, and if you want to blend that further, then go ahead. It's still wet. And then we come over here and we do the same thing. So it's actually a little bit of snow on the hill here, but we're not going to do snow because we want to make it look like Georgia O'Keeffe's. I mean, you can put snow on if you want to, it's up to you, but I'm just going to use the snow and the highlight created by the sun effectively. So again, paint downwards in sweeping motion, and it doesn't matter if it gets a little bit darker as we go over there, because it is doing that naturally anyway, isn't it? If you look at your image. So you can leave a little bit of texture in there. There's nothing wrong with a bit of texture. You can see her brush marks on her paintings, so you can leave a few in if you want. If you want it to be more blended, then just use the dry brush technique that I showed you earlier on for the sky, and just take a dry brush and go over the top of these marks that you're making. Okay, so they're the lighter patches. We have got a little bit of lightness coming over further, so I'm going to take up a bit of the cerulean and I'm going to put that in there. So this is the cerulean blue, or you can use the cobalt blue, and that's actually working real nice, and it's giving us that extreme of colour that we need for Georgia's work. Try not to use too much water, and it comes all the way across there like that. So we're going to need to blend it in to this whiter area. Just sort of blend it using sweeping strokes like this. Blend it. There we go. Okay, you can leave some lines because there are lines on these hills. There's a little darker area over the back of here, but I'll put that in later on. And then basically everything else are tonal values of those colours. So as we go down, if we go into more ultramarine here, so more ultramarine, but we want a line. Just going to mix it on my surface a little bit so it's not so lumpy. There's a few lumps on my brush. You can either do this on your palette or on the surface of your canvas, and then we can put the line. Line is actually, it comes down a little and then it goes across, doesn't it? But it's much higher than I've got it, so I'm going to put it here, all the way across, and then it goes up a little and across again, like that. And then this comes in here. We may put another darker tone there, because this is a different ridge to the one that's in the background. So we need to separate that somehow. Again, if you want to make these colours a little stronger and a little brighter, then go ahead. You can use sort of other shades of blue that you've got, or you can even add some different shades in together. So you could mix the ultramarine with a little bit of turquoise. If I do that now, and then you can see I'm doing this again on my canvas, but you can do it on a palette if you want to. So I'm coming in with this ultramarine turquoise colour, and again, if you haven't got turquoise, you can use a little bit of blue mixed with a bit of green to make your turquoise colour. So that comes all the way down there actually, doesn't it? So in with the turquoise like that, and then we're going to change colour as we go down the foreground into pink. So just blend it, work with the lay of the land. So if it's sweeping down to the right hand side, then use your brush down to the right hand side like this. It's going up into the ridges, then, and just blend it until you're happy. Can go back in and do this again if you need to, if you feel like you need to add some more colour, but we're just looking at the blues for the moment, and we'll put the pinks and the greens and things like that on afterwards. And just keep working your brush backwards and forwards, nice and light touch, so that you don't lift the paint off. You want to lift the paint off to an extent that actually that line, let me just go there again, that comes downwards like that, so I'm going to move my brush strokes down, sweeping like that, and I'm going to drag some paint over into that, and I can do that because my paint is still wet. Okay, now to do I'm just going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in this section here, which is a similar tone to this section. The way you see your tones is if you squint so that the detail is removed, and you can see the difference in the lights and darks of a painting, and squinting helps you to do that. So have a go. Now I feel like this patch here is slightly lighter than this patch here. You may not see it that way. If you don't, then you can change it. It is slightly lighter, so I've used more turquoise in this area than I have done on the other hill. And you could even add a touch of white into the turquoise, or even a little bit more green, just to lift this area a bit. Now when you get up to the top here, you'll find that this bit here is dried, so you need to sort of blend it into the dry paint, so it won't actually mix with the dry paint, but you need to just sort of thin it out a bit just by letting the paint fall off your brush. So just drag it up into that mountain like this, and then as your paint dries off your brush, you'll see that there's less there, so you can sort of just drag, so there's not a hard line there, just drag up little flecks of it almost into that distant hill. And we might add some more paint there, just because we don't want to have that line. I'm trying to think what we used. We used a little bit of this blue, So a bit of the pale blue colour which I used in the sky, just put a dot down and just blend it. So this is the pale blue. That I've put back in, and actually there's a flash coming down there, isn't there? So we could easily just, that's it, that's not so bad actually. Okay, there's a little dot there. I'm just going to put a bit of turquoise over it because you can see through to the canvas at the back. So when that happens, just add more paint. Okay, you can still see it. It's where there's a drip of water been. I might paint over that later. Okay, and then it goes into a darker tone of blue. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the indigo. And like I said, if you haven't got indigo, then you can use a little bit of Prussian blue or what other blues? We've got several dark blue colours. It depends what you've got in your set. If you haven't got any of those, then use a bit of black in your ultramarine or something like that. Okay. So again, be accurate with this mark that you're making. Try not to have this line too straight. I'm just going to get a finer brush just because I want to, let's see, which one should we use, that one. So I'm just going for a detail brush here because I want to be accurate with where I'm putting the paint in this area, because it sort of goes up and down, and it goes up into some of the upper areas of the mountain. There is a very defined line here, so we want to keep that, but as it goes up it sort of disappears. So we'll put a little bit here, and then we'll have some lines. Now don't be too don't go into too much detail. Georgia O'Keeffe's work is not detailed, so we don't want detail. Now if you want to put detail in, you can, but if you want the painting to remain like a Georgia O'Keeffe's, then keep it really simple. So we go over here. Make sure you paint in nice and tight to that brow. There, like that. And comes in there. And again, what we need to do is make sure that we don't end up with a line here. So let's take up a few of these marks into the hillside. Just like that. Just some descriptive, and do these with a fine pointed brush if you can, just so that you don't end up with clunky marks coming off these ridges. And you can see there's a sweeping mark there, so I'm going to put in a mark about there. I may go over some of these marks that I've made later, just to sort of refine them a bit, because I don't really like the way that they're going straight here. So if I just push them up and down like that, we'll have that bending. So you see there was a straight line there. That wasn't very easy on the eye, so I'm going to just change the line and the way that it angles like that. Okay, that's better. So when you get to that stage, just let it dry off. Just before you do that, if you just put in a little bit of dark paint just in here, oops, just in this section, just to define that mountain ridge there, and this one here. So just here, actually it goes a lot further over there, doesn't it, than I've put in there. So I'm just going to put that in there like that. Just so we separate this bit of mountain from this foreground. Like that. That's better. Okay, so the next bit we're going to do, I'm going to work on this bit a bit more so you can see it better, will be the foreground pink area. Okay, so I've just added in a little dark flash just here. I've added a little bit more of the dark blue in here. I put a little bit of dark blue just along this ridge here as well. Okay, so if we look at Georgia O'Keeffe's mountain range, we've got some patches of pale green and pale pink on there. So I want to put those in now, and I've got some ready mixed green, and this is just a bit of any green really with added and add a bit of white to it. And then I've got this sort of fleshy tone, which is the closest colour I've got to a pale pink at the moment, so I'm going to use that. And you can make that with a bit of yellow and a bit of red and a bit of white. Okay, just mix them together, small amounts so that you don't end up with excess paint. And we're just going to put a flash of green in first. And where would we do that? Well, if we look at the picture itself, this bit down here I want to do in the pink. So I'm going to look up here for bits of green, and there's a bit of green going up here, there's a bit of green over here, so I'm going to put them in those areas. So refer to Georgia's work here and just put the odd fleck of green here and there. Alright, you can choose to put it where you like again, but I'm just going to put some here like this, just on the top of, on the sort of brow of this hill, and it's probably the last bit of green that you'll get before you start getting the proper sort of heather moorland effects. So just pop that in, and it's sitting on top of the blue colour that you've put down, and the blue colour that's underneath should really be dry by now. Just going to rotate my brush a bit so I can get rid of the paint that's already on there, on the brush itself. I'm just going to blend it a little, but not a great deal. And it comes down, and there must be a path here, probably worn away by sheep or something like that, walkers, because the green sort of comes down this way. And it's being used in Georgia O'Keeffe's painting to sort of just bring a touch of detail back, because the painting is what you call semi-abstract. So the green is just giving you a little bit of form to the subject that she's painting. So in the same way we will do the same job. We'll use the green to just add a touch of detail, but not too much, because like I said, it's supposed to be a sort of semi-abstract representation of Penavan. So there we go with the green. We could bring a bit more down here, but we're going to put the pink in, so it might be that I work some colouring on top of the pink, but there's another path going. Looks like it's sort of just disappearing off to there like that, so I'm just going to put that there and maybe put a touch more down here where the land sort of curves. It's where it's been farmed a bit, I think. So down there, like that. Any more? Should we put a little bit? Let's put a little bit over here. Not up there, not there. Maybe just a touch in here somewhere. Just again using it to separate the two bodies of land, like this. I know it's darker there, and we might put in some darker tones later, but I quite like the idea of having a bit of light colour in here. Coming down behind that ridge there. Okay. So let's deal with the pink now. Now the pink seems to be describing foreground detail and maybe a bit of highlight again. So this is not exactly the right colour, but I've got it here, so I might as well use it. Let's see, where can we put this? So I think if we put, there's a line coming along here describing another part. Oops, that's a bit wet. Describing another of the pot. You can see what happens when you put water with it. Doesn't want to bond with the paper. Right, so we got it going now. We'll have this pink coming down there like that. I'll put the pink running alongside the green here, I think. Just again for a little bit of added detail. And like I said, this pink, you can make it pinker if you want to. Just a little bit of red and a bit of white will do just as well. This is more of a flesh tone. But I like to use my paints before they dry out, you see, so that's why I'm changing the colour slightly for this. But you use a pink if you want to use a pink, or even, you know, a red or a whatever. Okay, so that's another bit. Let's see if we can put it elsewhere. Yes, I think we can accentuate this highlight which is coming over this section here. Nice flash of colour there, and put that in using this lighter tone like that. Go into the ridge on the mountain. If we come down sort of from here, isn't it? Down there, across there a bit, and then it goes into the ridge like this in dots or stripes or whatever you want to paint. Just slight suggestion here and there of colour. Again, add a bit in and then go over it, and then at least if you've put it in the wrong place or it's too strong or whatever, you can always get rid of it a little bit easier. Like there, it's a bit thick. put another layer over the top just to make it a bit stronger if it needs to be stronger. Like that. It might be that you like it a bit sort of thin. Actually, we could probably put some up here as well. Let's highlight this path with this pink coming down there like that, and then we can put some on the top of this. Oops. Let's just put a little. I don't want to get rid of that blue completely, but it's a useful colour to have there. It also will help highlight this area here and make a little bit more of it. Again, just put it down thinly and then add more as necessary. Okay, I think that'll do. We'll have a look at it again because we're working in acrylic. You can afford to leave it and then put in this pink area. Alright, so then that'll be the next thing what we're doing. Right, I'm just going to show you quickly how to mix up pinky colour for this picture here. Okay, so I've got some white. I just want to show you the different pinks that come out of the different reds. So I'm just going to move the white over to 3 different or 4 different areas, and then into one I'm going to add a bit of cadmium red. Let's see if I can get it out of the pot because my pot's a bit dry. So this is cadmium red, so that gives you that colour. Mix it in well like that. Okay, so that's cadmium red. The next colour is alizarin crimson. Now you can see the difference in colour. I've just got an old palette here, an old paper plate, and then I've got a dark crimson, this colour here. Probably don't need so much of that because it's dark. That gives you that colour. And then I've got I think it's a rose madder colour. Now you probably won't have this in your set, but you might. Rose madder, and that gives you that colour. So you can see very clearly that the colour match to this is that colour there, this one. Okay, which was the cadmium red and the white mix, not these. If you like these, then you can use them, obviously. It's up to you, you're painting. But I'm going to stick with the bit of cadmium red and white. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit more because I want to make a lot of cadmium red, and I'm going to mix it into the rest of that white there. And you can see it gives you a sort of rosy, very pink rose colour, which is really beautiful. I might need some more. Ooh, don't want a big blob. It's a bit dry that in that pot. So make sure you mix it really well and make sure you have enough of the colour ready. Okay, just going to mix it, make sure I get it off my brush. I've got a bit of a skin there, maybe a touch of water just to keep it moist like that. Okay, so it's still a bit pale I think, but it's more or less that colour there. Do a colour test just by you can put a bit of it on your canvas and colour test it that way. So I've got my palette here just on this side, and I've got my painting of this still so I can see the bit of land that I'm painting, and I've got my original Georgia O'Keeffe painting as well, just there so I can see what I'm supposed to be painting where. So we're going to put this in here. Oops, I'm just going to wipe it off my brush a bit, because when you get big blobs on the end of your brush you end up with big blobs like that. And then up, paint over the edges and into the rest of the work, and we want some lumps, so I'm going to make some lumps like that, and then we're just going to fill that area in like we did with the sky and the mountains. Just really fill it in with plenty of paint. You want this to stay wet if you can, and the only way you can do that is by adding plenty of paint onto your canvas. Try not to flick it everywhere like I just did. And if you want those mounds to be bigger, then you can make them bigger. It's up to you. Smooth it out, overpaint it a bit. If it's starting to look a bit transparent, just add a little bit more paint in. You see how I roll the brush like that, so I end up having a little pile of paint to work with. Make your edges nice and smooth. Okay, alright, so now we want to start adding some tone in here. So you just do that by adding a touch more pigment to the mix. I've just got an extra bit of red. It might not be enough actually. Let me just pick that up. A bit more, there we go, that's better. I'm just going to put it on the edge. I'm just mixing it in like this. Now it might be that you go for other tones of red, it's up to you, but we can see that on the image it's slightly darker on the top of the hills than it is on the bottom. So I'm just going to, and I'm going to take a little bit of that Rose Madder, which is a pinky tone. I'm just going to put that in as well, just to give it a little bit of extra richness, extra bit of tone into that mix. Alright, I'm just going to put it along the top of my hill like this, and I'm going to drag it down like this into the rest of the colour, and then I'm just going to smooth, put a bit more on over here I think, especially there because I need to cover up that blue. It might be that you have to go in and put another layer on there, but, and again, because we're working in a downward, the hill is flowing down, use your brush marks in the same way. So just smooth it into the rest of the painting. Can you see how I'm doing that? There. Leave some patches of white. We don't want to cover it up completely. Into the next hill. And repeat the exercise. So again, now let's change the pattern, so we come down a little bit more vertically like that. I'm going to leave that bit there fairly clean of colour. I'm just going to put in, so again, work with the contours of the hills and downwards like that. Make sure that you don't, try not to add water. Mix with, blend with and mix with paint only if you can. I know that some of you might find this difficult, but it's just simply making sure that you've got enough paint on your brush and on your canvas underneath to work with. Smooth it in like that. That's still wet there, which is great, and then add some more here. Like that. Okay, if you want to lighten areas up, I'll put a little bit more lighter tone here, I think. And just add some of the undercoat back in again and just lighten things up. See this tone that we mixed initially, especially towards the bottom of the hills, like this. There we go. It's working quite nicely, I think. I'm going to put a little bit more white here. Well, lighter pink, should I say, rather than white. There. Okay, so that's the effect we're after. And that's the effect we've got. So the only difference is that there are some much lighter patches down the bottom here. So I'm going to take some white. Oh, hang on, I don't need to do that because I've got a bit of white here. Can you see, just on this top section here? I'll use that instead. I'm just going to lighten up along here and just make that a lot lighter. Again, just blend it left to right strokes like that. Blend it into your paintwork. Okay, so there we go. So we've turned this area, this foreground area, into the pink area which is there, and we have got some large trees poking out which are not obviously not included on here because we've only got small trees. So what I think is that we should put some maybe in the foreground, so rather than having them poking up behind the trees like they are here, like behind the hills should I say, I think we'll put them around here in the foreground. Okay, so if you've got some green, I'll just get some. Won't be a sec. Okay, so I've got some sap green here. If I can open it. Yep. Okay. This is sap green. Again, something that you probably will have in a lot of your sets. If you haven't got a sap green, then you can use something else. These are... I'm going to have to put a little bit of water with this because this is drying out quite a lot. Okay, so just knocked my microphone, sorry. So I'm just wetting this down a little bit because this has dried out quite a lot. Okay, so looking at George's work, let's put some trees in. Okay, so we're just going to put them, replicate what we've got in George's work, which are these sort of patchy, can you see that? Just there. So these sort of patchy trees. Again, you can go into detail if you want to with a few more branches or whatever, but essentially, again, it's the abstract nature of these paintings that we're looking to replicate. So just very simple structures, almost like fingers really, poking out from the front of this area here. I'm going to put a couple, let's see, let's have one here just so that it does look like something like the one that she's done, like that. If you want to overpaint things, before you put the trees on. So for example, if you find that there's patchy areas, then overpaint them before you put these trees on. Oops. Ooh. And again, you can put an undercoat of green on here, and then apply a second coat if it's not thick enough. I quite like this tree that's here as well, so I'm going to put something here to represent that tree. So what we've got is an impression of Pen y Fan seen through the eyes of Georgia O'Keeffe. So keep that in mind when you're creating your paintings. But if you want to move away from the Georgia O'Keeffe and use a little bit more detail, then go ahead. Now let's have a look. So what are we missing? So we've got a white line here, which I'm not sure what that is on this painting. It might just be a tide mark, it could be, I don't know what it is. Could be the seas over here or something like that, and the tide is coming in. This is just a mark because I put it down on a wet patch, so that ignore that. But we appear to have pretty much got most of what she's represented. I might put an extra layer on my clouds, and I might thicken up these green patches a little touch more, but I just want to, this is not quite dry, so don't do this yourself until you've dried off your work. In fact, I could just hair dryer it. Let me just do that. Just notice that I've got a blob in the sky there. Let me just try and get rid of, oh no. It's alright, I've got some blue paint and I can cover that up if necessary, but it is coming off. I'll have to cover that up later. Okay. Oh, I've got some bits now. Okay, let's whip this off and see if we don't run out of battery. Okay, so you can see that this does, if you haven't stuck it down well, like I have, it will leak underneath it slightly, but if you're going to frame your picture, you're going to frame up to this edge anyway, so you don't need to worry. But it does leave you with a nice clean result. Now I did say that I was going to work on top of this in water mixable oils, and I've done most of the painting with acrylic now, so any extra detail that you see in the final picture that you can put in if you want, I'll do with water mixable oils, and I'll demonstrate with those a blending technique that I'll put on at the end. I just wanted to show you pretty much what it's like. Okay, so there we have more or less the finished picture. I've just got to put some extra bits and bobs in there, but we're not far away from the Georgia O'Keeffe. Here we have the Georgia O'Keeffe, and there we have our representation of the beacons. Okay, the only thing I can see that's different is that these colours are slightly different. You might want to add a little bit of purple into your blues or something like that. There's a bit of detail here. I'm going to add a bit of detail later, so it's up to you how much you do that of that, but enjoy. Send me some of your pictures, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next week. What are we doing next week? So because it's the end of October, we're going to be doing a still life with pumpkins. Alright, so have a good week, stay safe, and keep in touch. Send me some pictures, and keep having a look on my free YouTube just to see if there's any bits and bobs that might help you with other issues that you might have with your paintings. See you next week. Bye.